The notification from my banking app made my heart stop. I blinked hard, hoping I was seeing things wrong, but the numbers didn't lie. $50,000. Gone. Just like that. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transaction history, each swipe revealing another piece of my savings vanishing into thin air. I'm Gianna, and I always thought I was smart with money. Worked 2 jobs through college, saved every penny I could, lived in a cramped studio apartment instead of splurging on something bigger. All of that careful planning reduced to a series of unauthorized transfers in less than 48 hours. This has to be a mistake, I muttered, pacing my small living room. I dialed the bank's fraud department, my fingers practically punching the numbers into the phone. I'm sorry, Ms. Gianna, but these transactions were authorized using your correct credentials, the representative said, her voice frustratingly calm. The transfers were made to 2 accounts, one belonging to Victoria Zimmerman and another to Jarrett Norris. My mother and my ex-boyfriend. The room started spinning. That's impossible, I said, my voice cracking. I never authorized. Then it hit me. Last week, Mom had asked to use my laptop to check her email. And Jarrett. He'd known my passwords from when we were together. I'd been meaning to change them after catching him with his coworker 2 months ago, but I'd put it off. I hung up and immediately called my mother, straight to voicemail, of course. Next, I tried Jarrett. 1 ring, 2 rings, click. Hey, G. His voice was casual, like he hadn't just helped steal my life savings. What's up? What's up? I laughed, but it came out more like a bark. I don't know, Jarrett. Maybe you can tell me why $50,000 just disappeared from my account. A pause. Look, G, your mum and I. My mum and you what? I snapped. Decided to take a vacation with my money? Another pause. She said you'd agreed to help her out. Said you felt bad about how things ended between us and wanted to make it up to me. Are you kidding me? I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. You really expect me to believe that? Gianna, baby, calm down. We can talk about this. Don't baby me. I cut him off. Where's my mother? We're at the airport. Look, it's not what you think. I ended the call and immediately pulled up my location tracking app. Mom had always insisted I keep it on her phone in case of emergencies. For once, her paranoia would work against her. There they were, 2 dots at Newark International Airport. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car, fury burning through my veins. 20 minutes later, I stormed through the airport terminal, following the dots on my phone. I spotted them at a coffee shop near Gate C4. My mother in her designer sunglasses, Jarrett in the leather jacket I'd bought him for his birthday. They were laughing, heads close together over what looked like first-class plane tickets. I started toward them, then stopped. Making a scene wouldn't get my money back. I needed to be smarter than that. My phone buzzed. A text from Clint, my best friend since middle school. Hey, you okay? Your location's showing you at the airport. I typed back quickly. Remember when you said you owed me for covering for you at Sarah Miller's party in 11th grade? Time to collect. How good are you at hacking airline systems? His response was immediate, better than I should be. What's going on? I watched as my mother threw her head back, laughing at something Jarrett said, probably congratulating themselves on how clever they were. My mother and Jarrett just stole my savings, I typed. They're about to take a fancy vacation with my money. Want to help me make sure it's a trip they'll never forget? 3 dots appeared as Clint typed his response. I smiled for the first time since seeing that bank notification. They thought they'd won, thought they could just take advantage of me and fly off into the sunset together. But they had no idea what was coming. My phone buzzed again. Clint's message read, I'm in. What's the plan? I took one last look at the happy couple at the coffee shop, my mother's hand resting on Jarrett's arm like they were old friends. The sight made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to stay calm. They wanted to play games? Fine. Let's play. I turned and walked away, already formulating my revenge. They'd learn the hard way. Karma doesn't just happen. Sometimes karma needs a little push. You want me to do what now? Clint's voice crackled through my car's speakers as I drove home from the airport. Hack into the airline system? Not exactly, I said, merging onto the highway. I need you to create some red flags. Make their names pop up in the system. And how exactly do you expect me to do that without committing a federal crime? I pulled into the parking lot of the coffee shop where Clint worked as an IT manager. That's why I'm coming to see you. You're the expert. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Clint at his corner table, watching him type furiously on his laptop. His dark-rimmed glasses reflected lines of code I couldn't begin to understand. Okay, so here's what we know, he said, not looking up from his screen. They're booked on flight AA1432 to Bali tomorrow morning. First-class tickets connecting through Dubai. Of course they got first class, I muttered, clutching my coffee cup. Why fly economy when you're spending someone else's money? Clint looked up, his expression serious. Gee, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, this is your mom we're talking about. The same mom who helped my ex-boyfriend steal my savings. I leaned forward. The same mom who's probably laughing about how she outsmarted her own daughter right now. Fair point. He pushed his glasses up his nose. But we need to be smart about this. We can't do anything illegal. What about that thing you did at your last job? The security flag system? His eyes lit up. Actually, that might work. See, every airline has this automated system that flags suspicious passengers. Usually it's for actual security threats, but I might be able to create a small program that generates certain patterns. Nothing illegal, just enough unusual activity to trigger some extra screening. I felt a smile spread across my face. Keep talking. Well, for instance, he typed something quickly. If someone books a one-way first-class ticket at the last minute, pays in cash, and then has unusual spending patterns, like draining someone else's bank account. Exactly, he grinned. The system might flag that for extra attention. My phone buzzed. A text from Joanna, my mother's best friend. Honey, did you know your mum's going on vacation with Jarrett? Seems strange. I showed the message to Clint. See? Even her friends think something's off. Perfect, he said, typing faster. That's another angle we can work. Social media. What do you mean? Well, your mum loves posting everything on Facebook, right? And Jarrett's always on Instagram. I nodded, remembering how he'd posted photos with his co-worker while we were still together. So we make sure people notice, tag them in posts about financial fraud, share articles about family betrayal, get their friends asking questions. Can you do all that without it being traced back to us? He gave me a mock-offended look. Please, I've been covering digital tracks since before Mark Zuckerberg was cool. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Joanna. Just saw them at the mall buying designer luggage, using cash. Very unlike Victoria. Perfect timing, Clint said, reading over my shoulder. Screenshot that. We'll need it later. I watched as he worked his magic, fingers flying over the keyboard. There, he said after a few minutes. I've set up automated posts that'll start appearing tonight. Nothing direct, just enough to make people wonder. And the airline system? Already done. Their names are now associated with some interesting patterns. Nothing illegal, just enough to warrant a thorough security check tomorrow morning. How thorough? He smiled wickedly. Let's just say they might want to get to the airport extra early. And maybe pack light. Just then my phone rang. It was my mother. I showed the screen to Clint. Don't answer, he advised. Let her sweat a little. I declined the call and watched as a text message appeared immediately after. Darling, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I read aloud, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Is that what we're calling theft now? Clint closed his laptop. You know they're going to try to spin this, right? Make it seem like you're overreacting. Let them try. I stood up, feeling more in control than I had all day. By this time tomorrow, they'll have bigger problems than my hurt feelings. Just remember, Clint called as I headed for the door. Revenge is a dish best served. Through airport security, I finished, grinning. With extra screening. As I walked to my car, another text came through from my mother. Please call me back. You're making a big mistake. I laughed out loud. No, Mom. The big mistake was yours. And tomorrow you're going to learn exactly how big it was. Have you seen this? Joanna slid her phone across the table at the diner where we'd met for lunch. Her Facebook feed showed my mother's latest post, a selfie with Jarrett at some expensive restaurant captioned, "Pre-vacation dinner with my favourite travel companion." Blessed, shock new beginnings. Charming, I said, pushing the phone back. Did she happen to mention where she got the money for this little adventure? Joanna stirred her coffee, her face tight with concern. I've known your mother for 20 years, Gianna. This isn't like her. Really? I pulled out my own phone showing her the bank statements. Because stealing from me seems exactly like her. Remember when she borrowed my college fund for that spa retreat? That was different, Joanna said, but her voice wavered. She paid that back. After I threatened to report her to the police, I took a sip of my coffee. But this time she's gone too far. $50,000, Joanna. And involving Jarrett? My phone buzzed with a text from Clint. Everything's set. Their names are lighting up security systems like Christmas trees. What are you going to do? Joanna asked, noticing my smile. Before I could answer, the diner's door chimed. I looked up to see Jarrett walking in, his face falling when he spotted me. Gianna, he said, approaching our table. We need to talk. About what? I asked coolly. About how you and my mother stole my savings? Or about how you're planning to spend it in Bali? He glanced nervously at Joanna, then back to me. It's not stealing if we're going to pay it back. Your mom said... My mom said what? I stood up, my voice rising. That it was okay to take my money without asking. That betraying my trust was fine because you're planning to pay it back. Other diners were starting to stare. Jarrett shifted uncomfortably. Look, we just needed a vacation. Your mum's been stressed, and after everything that happened between us... You mean after I caught you cheating? He flinched. That was a mistake. I've been trying to make it right. By stealing my money? I laughed bitterly. That's an interesting way to make things right. My phone buzzed again. Clint, just checked their flight status. They're in for a fun surprise at security tomorrow. Jarrett noticed my smirk. What are you planning, G? Me? Nothing. I sat back down, suddenly calm. Just enjoying my coffee. Shouldn't you be packing? He studied my face for a moment, then pulled out his phone. After a few taps, his eyes widened. Why are people commenting about fraud on your mum's Facebook post? I shrugged. Maybe because fraud is exactly what this is? You need to stop this, he said, his voice low and threatening. Your mom doesn't deserve... My mom doesn't deserve what? Joanna cut in, surprising us both. To face consequences for her actions? To be called out for stealing from her own daughter? Jarrett's phone started ringing, my mother's face flashing on the screen. You should get that, I said sweetly. Wouldn't want to keep your travel companion waiting. He answered the phone, walking away from our table. I could hear my mother's panicked voice even from a distance. What did you do? Joanna asked once he was out of earshot. Let's just say their vacation might not go as smoothly as they planned. I checked my watch. In about 18 hours, they're going to learn a valuable lesson about karma. Gianna. Joanna reached across the table, taking my hand. Are you sure about this? Your mother, despite everything? She's still your mother. A mother who's willing to steal from her daughter doesn't deserve that title. I pulled my hand away. Besides, I'm not doing anything wrong, just making sure the right people ask the right questions. Jarrett stormed back to our table, his face red. Your mother's crying. Are you happy now? Not yet, I said, standing up. But ask me again tomorrow afternoon. As I walked out of the diner, I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't turn around. My phone buzzed one more time, a message from an unknown number. Hi, this is Jalen from the Daily Observer. I heard about your story and would love to talk. This kind of financial exploitation needs to be exposed. I saved the number. A new plan forming in my mind. If my mother and Jarrett wanted attention so badly, maybe it was time to give it to them, just not the kind they were expecting. Perfect timing, I texted back. Let's meet tomorrow. I have a feeling there's going to be quite a story to tell. The cafe where I met Jalen was quiet, just a few early morning customers nursing their coffees. He was easy to spot, young professional with a laptop covered in journalist stickers and a press badge hanging from his messenger bag. Thanks for meeting me, he said. pulling out a chair. I've been following similar stories lately. Family members exploiting each other financially. It's becoming disturbingly common. I placed my phone on the table, screen up, showing the banking app. Well, here's another one for your collection. Mind if I record this? He pulled out his phone. At my nod, he pressed record. So, walk me through what happened. It started 2 days ago, I began, but was interrupted by my phone buzzing. Another message from my mother. Please don't do anything rash. We can work this out as a family. I showed Jalen the message. That's rich coming from someone who's about to board a first-class flight to Bali with my money. How did they get access to your accounts? My mother asked to use my laptop last week, must have watched me enter my passwords. And Jarrett, I paused, remembering how I'd trusted him. He knew them from when we were together. Tell me about Jarrett, Jalen said, typing notes. How does he fit into all this? We dated for 2 years. He charmed everyone, especially my mother. I caught him cheating 2 months ago, but apparently that didn't stop them from becoming travel buddies. My phone buzzed again. Clint. Security flags are active. They're going to have fun explaining those suspicious transaction patterns. Jalen leaned forward. You mentioned they took $50,000. That's a significant amount. What were you saving for? A house, I said, my voice catching. I've been saving since college, working extra shifts, living on ramen noodles, doing everything right, and they just took it all, he finished, his expression sympathetic. Have you considered legal action? I've got something better planned. I glanced at my phone's clock, 6:30 a.m. Their flight was at 10. Let's just say their vacation isn't going to start the way they expected. Care to elaborate? I smiled. Let's meet again this afternoon. I have a feeling you'll have a much bigger story by then. Just then, the cafe door opened and Jarrett walked in. His face darkened when he saw me with Jalen. Really, G? He strode over to our table. Running to the press? That's low even for you. Lower than stealing from your ex-girlfriend? Jalen asked, his recorder still running. Jarrett's eyes darted to the device. Turn that off. It's a public place, Jalen said calmly. Care to comment on the unauthorized transfers from Ms. Gianna's account? This is family business, Jarrett snapped. Family? I laughed. You lost the right to call yourself family when you cheated on me. Or was that when you decided to steal my savings? Your mother needed a break. And my life savings was the solution? I stood up, facing him. Tell me, Jarrett, how exactly were you planning to pay it back? He shifted uncomfortably. We have a plan. A plan? I pulled up my banking app. Like the multiple transfers you made over 2 days? Or the first-class tickets you bought? That kind of plan. Jalen was typing furiously, documenting everything. You don't understand, Jarrett said, his voice dropping. Your mother, she's not in a good place. She needed this. And I needed my savings. Funny how that wasn't a consideration. My phone buzzed again. Clint. Airport security just got an anonymous tip about suspicious financial activity linked to their tickets. They're going to have a great time explaining that. Jarrett's phone rang. My mother again. He answered, turning away from our table. Victoria? Yeah, I'm with her now. She's talking to a reporter. I know. Look, maybe we should postpone. I could hear my mother's voice getting louder through the phone. Jarrett winced and held the phone away from his ear. This is gold, Jalen whispered, still recording. Mind if I stick around until they leave for the airport? I checked the time again. 7 SAS a.m. Trust me, you'll want to be at the airport for what happens next. That's where the real story begins. Jarrett ended his call looking defeated. Your mother's crying again. I hope you're happy. Happiness has nothing to do with it, I said, gathering my things. This is about justice and karma. Speaking of which, shouldn't you be heading to the airport? I hear security lines are especially long today. As Jarrett hurried out, Jalen turned to me. What exactly is going to happen at the airport? I smiled, picking up my coffee. Let's just say some stories are better witnessed firsthand. Meet me at Terminal C in 2 hours. You won't want to miss this. Terminal C was bustling with morning travellers when I arrived. Clint was already there, laptop balanced on his knees, sitting in the coffee shop overlooking the security checkpoint. "They just checked in," he said as I sat down. "Your mother tried to upgrade their seats to an even better class. Guess what happened?" "Tell me." "The system flagged the transaction as suspicious. They had to use their original tickets." He grinned. "First domino down." Jalen joined us, camera ready. "Anything yet?" "Just wait," I said, watching my mother and Jarrett approach security. Mum was wearing her favourite travel outfit, designer everything naturally. Probably bought with my money too. "There they go," Clint narrated, typing. "Right about now." The security agent checking IDs stopped, frowning at his screen. He called over a supervisor. "What's happening?" Jalen asked, raising his camera discreetly. "Their names are triggering security protocols," Clint explained. "Multiple cash transactions, last-minute bookings, unusual spending patterns. All perfectly legal to report, by the way." We watched as the supervisor directed my mother and Jarrett to a separate line. Mom's voice carried across the terminal. "This is ridiculous. Don't you know who I am?" "Oh, they know exactly who you are," I murmured, as another agent approached them with a clipboard. Jarrett was checking his phone frantically. "They're probably seeing all those fraud comments on social media," Clint said. "Amazing how fast news travels, isn't it?" My phone buzzed. "Joanna, Victoria just called me panicking. Something about security problems." "What's going on?" I typed back. "Justice." The security team was now going through their carry-on bags. My mother's face turned red as they pulled out her designer makeup bag. "Mom," we heard the agent say, "can you explain these recent cash transactions?" "That's none of your business," Mom snapped. "This is harassment." "Actually," the agent replied, "it is our business. We've received several reports about suspicious financial activity." Jarrett tried to step in. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding." "Sir, please step back. We need to ask you some questions as well." Jalen was capturing everything. "This is better than I expected," he whispered. A new security agent approached with more papers. "Ms. Zimmerman, Mr. Norris, we need to verify the source of funds used for these tickets." My mother's face went pale. Jarrett started sweating. "Should we tell them?" Clint asked, grinning. "Tell them what?" Jalen looked between us. "That every major airline has an automated system that flags potential financial crimes," Clint explained. "Completely legal to report suspicious activity, and someone," he winked at me, "might have ensured their transaction patterns looked very suspicious indeed." My phone buzzed again, this time from my mother. "What have you done? Please make this stop." I watched as they were led to a private screening room, their faces a mixture of panic and rage. Their expensive luggage was being thoroughly searched, designer clothes spilling out onto examination tables. "Your mother's going to be furious," Jalen said, still filming. "She's already furious," I replied, "but now she's also embarrassed, inconvenienced, and delayed. Just like I was when I discovered they'd stolen my savings." "They're missing their flight," Clint announced, checking his laptop. "No way they're getting through security in time now." "What about the tickets?" Jalen asked. "Non-refundable," I said. "First-class tickets to Bali, paid for with stolen money, now worthless." My phone was buzzing constantly now, messages from my mother, Jarrett, even their friends asking what was happening. I turned it off. "Look," Clint pointed. The security team was now examining their phones, probably seeing all the suspicious transfers. "Ms. Zimmerman," we heard the supervisor say, "we're going to need you to come with us. There are some serious questions about these financial transactions." My mother's perfectly made-up face crumpled. Jarrett looked like he might be sick. "Should we go down there?" Jalen asked, already standing. I shook my head. "Not yet. This is just the beginning." "What do you mean?" I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. Their flight had just departed without them. "Well," I said, standing up, "now that they've missed their flight and are being questioned by airport security, I think it's time for phase 2. "There's more?" Jalen's eyes lit up. "Of course there's more," I smiled, watching as my mother and Jarrett were escorted to what looked like an interview room. They thought they could steal my money and jet off to paradise. Instead, they're about to learn a very public lesson about karma. Clint closed his laptop. "Should I start the social media cascade?" I nodded, picking up my bag. Light it up. Let's show everyone exactly who they really are. 3 hours. That's how long my mother and Jarrett spent in the airport security office while their story unraveled like a cheap sweater. Jalen and I watched from the terminal coffee shop as a parade of officials went in and out of the room. Your mother's trending on Twitter, Clint announced, showing me his phone. And vacation fraud is picking up steam. My own phone had started working overtime. Screenshots of my bank statements, alongside photos of their planned luxury vacation, were spreading across social media like wildfire. Look at this, Jalen said, turning his laptop toward me. The local news website's headline read, "Mother-son duo caught in airport after alleged theft from daughter." Son? I laughed. Oh, Jarrett's going to love that. Right on cue, the security office door opened. Jarrett emerged first, his designer clothes wrinkled, face ashen. My mother followed, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Ms. Zimmerman," Jalen called out, rushing forward with his camera. "Care to comment on the allegations of stealing $50,000 from your daughter?" Other passengers stopped to watch, phones coming out to record the scene. "This is a private matter," my mother snapped, trying to shield her face. "Private?" I stood up, walking toward them. "Like privately draining my bank account?" "Gianna," my mother's eyes widened. You did this." "Did what?" "Report theft. Expose fraud." "Yes, Mother, I did." Jarrett stepped forward. "You've ruined everything." "No," I corrected him. "You both ruined everything when you decided to steal my savings." A small crowd had gathered. I recognized some faces from my mother's country club. They were recording everything on their phones. "We were going to pay it back," my mother pleaded, noticing the growing audience. "When?" I demanded. "After spending it all on first-class flights and luxury resorts?" "Your mother needed this vacation," Jarrett insisted. "And I needed my savings." My voice echoed through the terminal. I needed the money I worked 2 jobs to save. The money I sacrificed everything for. Security officers approached, looking concerned about the commotion. "Is there a problem here?" one asked. "No problem," I said calmly. "Just a daughter confronting her mother and ex-boyfriend about stealing her life savings for a luxury vacation." The officer turned to my mother. "Ma'am, we've contacted the Financial Crimes Unit. They'll want to speak with you." My mother's face went from red to white. "But our flight has already left," Clint called out, waving from his seat. "Without you, non-refundable tickets, remember?" Jarrett checked his phone, then groaned. "Victoria, we're trending. Everyone's sharing the story." "What story?" my mother demanded. Jalen stepped forward, professional as ever. "The story of how a mother betrayed her daughter's trust, stole her savings, and tried to escape to Bali with her daughter's ex-boyfriend." That story. More phones were recording now. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Shame on you!" "Gianna, please," my mother whispered, reaching for me. "We can fix this." I stepped back. "Fix what? My empty bank account? My broken trust? Or maybe your ruined reputation?" "We'll pay it back," Jarrett promised desperately. "Every cent." "Of course you will," I said. "The police will make sure of that." As if on cue, 2 plainclothes detectives approached. "Victoria Zimmerman, Jarrett Norris, we need you to come with us." My mother started crying again. "Gianna, don't do this. I'm your mother." "A mother who stole from her daughter," someone in the crowd muttered. I watched as the detectives led them away, my mother's designer heels clicking against the terminal floor, Jarrett's shoulders slumped in defeat. "That's quite a story," Jalen said, reviewing his footage. "Mind if I follow up with you later? This is definitely making the evening news." I nodded, feeling strangely empty. Clint appeared beside me, showing me his phone. The story was everywhere now. Local news sites, social media, even a few national outlets picking it up. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Yeah," I said, watching my mother and Jarrett disappear around a corner with the detectives. "I just never thought that they'd actually face consequences. That karma would work so fast." My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Joanna. Just saw everything online. I'm so sorry, honey. I had no idea Victoria could do something like this. I typed back, neither did I, but now everyone knows exactly who she is. Clint put his arm around my shoulders. Come on, let's get out of here. I think they're going to be busy for a while. As we walked out of the terminal, I heard someone whisper, "That's her, the daughter they stole from." But for the first time in days, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt powerful. They'd tried to take everything from me, but in the end, they'd lost far more than money. They'd lost their reputation, their freedom, and most importantly, they'd lost me. The police station was buzzing with activity when I arrived the next morning. Detective Rivera had called asking me to come in and give a formal statement. As I walked through the lobby, a familiar voice stopped me dead in my tracks. "Gianna, please just talk to me." My mother sat on a bench near the entrance, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking nothing like the polished socialite she usually portrayed. Her makeup was smeared, her designer outfit wrinkled from spending the night in holding. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, walking past her. "I'm your mother." She jumped up, grabbing my arm. "You can't just destroy my life like this." I yanked my arm away. "Like you destroyed my savings?" "It was a mistake," she pleaded. "I'll fix it. I'll sell my jewelry, my car, anything." "Ms. Zimmerman," a stern voice called out. "Please step away from the witness." Detective Rivera approached, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Gianna, thank you for coming in. Follow me, please." As we walked to her office, I could hear my mother sobbing dramatically. Classic Victoria. Always the victim, never the villain. "Your ex-boyfriend has agreed to cooperate," Detective Rivera said, closing her office door. "He's providing details about how your mother convinced him to help access your accounts." "Of course he is," I muttered. "Jarrett always was good at saving his own skin." A knock at the door interrupted us. Another detective poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." He handed Rivera a tablet. On the screen was a local news website featuring Jalen's story. The headline read, "Mother's betrayal goes viral. Social media erupts over family, financial fraud." "Your story's gaining traction," Rivera said, showing me the tablet. "We've received calls from 3 other families reporting similar incidents." My phone buzzed. A message from Joanna. "Turn on Channel 7 now." I pulled up the local news livestream on my phone. There was Jarrett being led out of the station in handcuffs, reporters swarming around him. "Mr. Norris, did you help steal from your ex-girlfriend? Was this revenge for the breakup? How long have you been involved with Ms. Zimmerman's mother?" Jarrett kept his head down, but I could see his face was red with shame. "We've frozen their assets," Rivera continued. "The good news is we should be able to recover most of your money." Another knock. This time it was my mother's lawyer looking harried. "Detective, my client would like to make a deal." "A deal?" I laughed. "Let me guess. She'll pay everything back if I drop the charges." The lawyer adjusted his tie uncomfortably. "Ms. Zimmerman is willing to make full restitution plus interest. She's also prepared to make a public apology." "How generous," I said, standing up. "But this isn't about money anymore." "Gianna, please," the lawyer started. "No," I cut him off. "She needs to learn that actions have consequences, that she can't just buy her way out of everything." My phone buzzed again. Clint this time. "Check your email. You've got interview requests from 3 major networks." Rivera raised an eyebrow. "This is getting bigger than expected." "Good," I said. "Let everyone see what they did." Suddenly, shouting erupted from the lobby. We rushed out to find Jarrett and my mother face to face, screaming at each other. "This is your fault," Jarrett yelled. "You said she'd never find out." "My fault?" my mother screeched. "You're the one who knew her passwords. Because you asked me to help. You said we deserved this vacation." "Deserved?" I called out, making them both turn. "You deserved to steal my life savings?" The lobby had gone quiet, everyone watching the drama unfold. "Honey," my mother tried again, "we can fix this. Just tell them you don't want to press charges." "Press charges?" I stepped closer. Mother, I want them to throw the book at you, both of you. But I'm your mother. No, I said, my voice steady. A mother protects her child. A mother builds her daughter up, not tears her down. You're just a thief who happened to give birth to me? The silence in the lobby was deafening. Officers were recording on their phones. Somewhere, a camera flashed. Take them back to holding, Rivera ordered. We're done here. As they were led away, my mother called out one last time, Gianna, please, don't do this to me. But I was already walking out the door, head held high. My phone buzzed with another message from Jalen. Stories going national. Ready for your interview? I looked back at the station where my mother and ex-boyfriend were facing the consequences of their actions. Yes, I replied. It's time everyone heard the truth. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as my mother and Jarrett emerged from their sentencing hearing. Their designer clothes had been replaced by modest business attire, a far cry from the luxury vacation wear they'd planned to flaunt in Bali. Restitution of all stolen funds plus interest, Clint read from his phone, showing me the court's decision. Community service, probation, and mandatory financial counselling. Don't forget the restraining orders, Jalen added, snapping photos. His exposé had gone viral, leading to a book deal about family financial abuse. My mother spotted me and started walking over, but her lawyer held her back. The restraining order was already in effect. Ready for your speech? Joanna asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, approaching the podium where several microphones were set up. The crowd quieted as I cleared my throat. Today isn't about revenge, I began. It's about justice, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been betrayed by the people they trusted most. Cameras flashed. I could see my mother crying silently in the background. Since this story broke, hundreds of people have reached out with similar experiences. Parents stealing from children, partners betraying partners. The cycle ends here. Jarrett tried to slip away, but reporters swarmed him. Mr. Norris, how does it feel to be known as the man who helped rob his ex-girlfriend? He ducked his head, hurrying down the steps. The court's decision today sends a message, I continued. Family ties don't excuse criminal behavior. Trust, once broken, has consequences. My phone buzzed, a message from the domestic violence shelter where I'd been volunteering. Your story helped 3 more victims come forward today. Thank you. To anyone watching who's been victimized by family members, I said, don't stay silent. Don't let them guilt you into compliance. Stand up. Speak out. There are people who will help. As I stepped away from the podium, Detective Rivera approached. The DA wanted you to know. 2 more cases like yours are going to trial next week. You started something important here. My mother made one last attempt to reach me, calling out across the crowd. Gianna, I'm still your mother. You can't just throw away family. I turned to face her. You threw away family when you chose greed over your daughter. The mother I needed died the day you stole my savings. The reporters went wild, cameras flashing everywhere. What's next for you? Someone shouted. I'm working with lawmakers to strengthen penalties for family financial abuse, I replied. And thanks to the court-ordered restitution, I'm finally buying that house I saved for. Clint appeared at my side. Speaking of which, your real estate agent called. That place we looked at last week just accepted your offer. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My mother's attempt to steal my dream had only made it happen faster. Any final words for your mother? A reporter called out. I looked at Victoria one last time, this woman who'd given me life but tried to steal my future. She was sobbing into her lawyer's shoulder, her carefully crafted image shattered. Just this, I said. Thank you for teaching me what a mother shouldn't be. I won't make the same mistakes. As we walked away, Joanna linked her arm through mine. Your father would be so proud of you today. Ms. Gianna? A young woman ran up, tears in her eyes. Your story gave me the courage to report my own mother's theft. Thank you. More people approached, sharing similar stories. What had started as personal justice had become a movement. Ready to go? Clint asked, keys in hand. The shelter's waiting for that donation you promised. I nodded, taking one last look at the courthouse. My mother was being led to a waiting car, Head bowed. Jarrett had already disappeared. You know, Jalen said, reviewing his photos, when I first heard this story, I thought it was about revenge. But it's really about breaking cycles, isn't it? And building something better, I added, thinking of the house I'd soon call home. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from the lawmakers I'd been working with. Bill passed committee. Family Financial Abuse Prevention Act moves to full vote next week. I smiled, pocketing my phone. They'd tried to steal my dream, but instead, they'd given me a purpose. Every person who came forward, every law changed, every cycle broken, that was the real victory. Let's go, I said, walking toward the future I'd saved for, earned, and finally claimed as my own. We've got work to do.
I always believed that if you worked hard enough, life would eventually reward you. I guess that's what made me Miranda Thompson, top of my class in law school and engaged to the love of my life, Michael. He was everything I thought I wanted, smart, charming, and ambitious. We met in a constitutional law class, and it didn't take long for our study sessions to turn into late-night talks about our future together. Can you believe it, Miranda? In just a week, you'll be Mrs. Miranda Richardson, Michael said, his eyes sparkling with excitement as he wrapped his arms around me. I laughed, leaning into his embrace. I still can't believe you convinced me to take your last name, but yes, I can't wait. But beneath the surface of our perfect little world, there were cracks. My mom, Linda, remarried when I was just a toddler, and my stepdad, Greg, was the only father figure I knew. My biological dad, Dr. James Thompson, was a big shot in the medical world, but just a shadow in my life. We talked occasionally, and he sent gifts on my birthdays, but that was it. Mom made it clear she didn't want him around, and I never pushed it. As the wedding day approached, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness that he wouldn't be there. You okay, honey? My mom asked, noticing my distant look as we went over the seating chart. Yeah, I wish Dad could be here, I admitted, referring to my biological father. Linda sighed, her expression hardening. Miranda, we've been over this. Your stepfather has been more of a dad to you than James ever was. Let's not ruin your big day by bringing up the past. I nodded, not wanting to argue. It was easier that way. My stepsister Sarah was the complete opposite of me. At 20, she was the wild child, always seeking attention, especially from Greg and Mom. They doted on her, and I often felt like an afterthought. Are you seriously still moping about Daddy not coming? Grow up, Miranda, Sarah chided, rolling her eyes as she walked into the room. Sarah, that's enough, Linda scolded, but her tone was gentle, almost indulgent. The day before the wedding, the tension was palpable. Michael seemed distant, and Sarah was unusually smug. I tried to shake off the feeling that something was off. Hey, are you sure you're okay? I asked Michael as we were setting up the venue. He forced a smile. Just pre-wedding jitters, babe. Everything's going to be perfect. I wanted to believe him, but something in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. I wish I had listened to that feeling. The day I had been dreaming of since I was a little girl had finally arrived. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and everything seemed perfect. I stood in front of the mirror, my wedding dress hugging every curve perfectly. You look beautiful, Miranda, my mom said, her voice soft, a rare moment of tenderness between us. Thanks, Mom. I just wish Dad could see me, I replied, feeling a familiar ache in my heart. You have us, Miranda. That's enough, she said, her tone firm, as if closing the topic for good. The ceremony was like something out of a fairy tale. I walked down the aisle, my heart pounding with excitement. Michael stood there, looking handsome as ever, but his eyes, they didn't have the usual warmth. I pushed the thought away, convincing myself it was just nerves. As we stood facing each other, the officiant began. Do you, Michael Richardson, take Miranda Thompson to be your lawfully wedded wife? Before Michael could respond, the doors at the back of the hall burst open. It was Sarah, her eyes wild, her face flushed. Stop! Stop the wedding! She yelled, her voice echoing through the silent hall. Everyone turned, stunned. I felt like the ground was slipping away beneath me. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I demanded, my voice shaking. She looked at me, then at Michael, a twisted smile on her face. "I'm pregnant, Miranda, and Michael is the father." The room erupted into chaos. My mom and Greg rushed toward Sarah while I stood there, frozen. "Is this true, Michael?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Miranda. I didn't mean for this to happen." I felt like I couldn't breathe. The world spun around me. "Sorry? You destroy our future and all you can say is sorry?" I spat, my voice rising. My mom came to me, her expression stern. "Miranda, calm down. We need to handle this sensibly." "Calm down? My fiancé cheated on me with my sister, and you want me to calm down?" I couldn't believe her words. "Miranda, it's a complicated situation. Michael is a decent man. He wants to take responsibility for the child," Greg added. "A decent man? A decent man doesn't cheat on his fiancée with her sister." I shot back, my anger boiling over. The guests murmured among themselves, some looking at me with pity, others with judgment. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran out of the hall, the sound of my wedding dress tearing as I pushed through the doors. That day, my dream wedding turned into a nightmare. The betrayal by Michael and Sarah was a harsh blow, but the lack of support from my own family was a stab to the heart. It was clear where their loyalties lay, and it wasn't with me. The morning after the wedding that never was felt surreal. I woke up in my childhood room, the white dress, now stained and torn, a painful reminder of the debacle. My phone was overflowing with messages and missed calls, but I ignored them all. I couldn't face the world, not yet. I could hear my mom and Greg talking downstairs, their voices a low hum. I had no desire to join them. The way they had sided with Sarah and Michael was a betrayal I couldn't digest. I decided then and there that I needed a fresh start, away from all this mess. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I knew by heart, but seldom called. "Dad?" I said hesitantly when the call connected. "Miranda? Is everything okay?" His voice was laced with concern. "Dad, The wedding didn't happen. I need to get away from here. Can I come stay with you?" I asked, my voice breaking. There was a brief pause. "Of course, Miranda. Come as soon as you can," he replied, his tone reassuring. Packing was a blur. I threw clothes and essentials into a suitcase, not caring about the order. When I went downstairs, suitcase in tow, my mom looked up, startled. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm leaving, Mom. I can't stay here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't just run away from your problems, Miranda," Greg chimed in, his expression disapproving. "This isn't running away. It's choosing not to stay where I'm clearly not wanted," I countered, my resolve firm. My mom's face softened slightly. "Miranda, we're your family. You belong here." "You made your choice, Mom. Now I'm making mine," I said, turning towards the door. The drive to my dad's city was long and gave me plenty of time to think. I felt a mix of fear, excitement, and uncertainty. Starting over wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. When I arrived, my dad was waiting at the door. He looked older than I remembered. "Miranda, I'm so sorry about what happened," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Thanks, Dad. I just need to figure things out, start fresh," I replied, grateful for his support. Over the next few days, Dad helped me settle in. He even introduced me to an old friend of his, Mr. Anderson, who ran a prestigious law firm in the city. "Miranda's an excellent lawyer. She graduated top of her class," Dad boasted during the introduction. Mr. Anderson looked at me, his eyes assessing. "We could use someone like you in our team. Why don't you come in for an interview next week?" I was taken aback by the offer, but managed a grateful smile. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I'd like that." As I started to rebuild my life in this new city, I realized that sometimes the worst things in life can lead you to where you truly belong. I was ready to face whatever came my way with a new sense of determination and hope. I had been working at Anderson and Amp, associates, for about 6 months when it happened. My life was finally on track, and I was slowly regaining my confidence. That's when Michael Richardson, of all people, walked into the office. I was at my desk, buried in case files, when I heard his all-too-familiar voice. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Richardson, the new associate." My head snapped up, and our eyes met. He looked as shocked to see me as I was to see him. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael cleared his throat, regaining his composure. "I was hired last week. I didn't know you worked here." Mr. Anderson, oblivious to the tension, clapped a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Miranda, meet Michael, our new star. You two should get along well, both top of your classes." I forced a smile, feeling like I was going to be sick. "Nice to meet you, Michael," I lied. As the days went by, working with Michael became my new reality. I avoided him as much as possible, but it was hard in the small office space. Then, one day, he cornered me in the break room. "Miranda, we need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, trying to move past him. He blocked my way. "Please, hear me out. I'm sorry for everything." "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Michael. You ruined everything," I said, my voice rising. "I know, and I regret it every day. But you need to know, Sarah lost the baby because of the stress from the wedding. She can't have children now." "That's on you," he accused. I stared at him, incredulous. "On me? You cheat on me, and somehow it's my fault? You're unbelievable." Michael's face hardened. "You could have handled it better. You didn't have to run away." I laughed bitterly. "Handled it better? You destroyed my life, Michael. You and Sarah. Don't you dare put that on me." He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't want to hear it. I pushed past him and left the room. The nerve of him, blaming me for his and Sarah's actions. It was like a slap in the face, a reminder of the pain and humiliation I had gone through. As I sat back at my desk, trying to calm my racing heart, I realized this was just the beginning. Working with Michael was going to be a challenge, but I was determined not to let him get to me. I had come too far to be dragged down by his guilt and manipulations. The annual corporate party at Anderson and Amp Associates was something I had been looking forward to, a chance to let loose and celebrate our hard work. That was until I found out Michael and his sister Sarah would be there. I had managed to avoid Sarah since the disaster of a wedding, and the thought of facing her now twisted my stomach into knots. I arrived at the party dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, hoping to blend into the background. The atmosphere was lively, with music playing and colleagues laughing. I was grabbing a drink when I heard a familiar, grating voice. "Well, well, if it isn't the runaway bride," Sarah sneered, sidling up to me with a glass of champagne in her hand. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" "Oh, Michael invited me. After all, I am family," she said, her eyes scanning me up and down. I clenched my jaw. "I'm not going to let you ruin this night for me." Sarah laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "I already ruined your life, didn't I? Or should I say, you ruined it yourself with your little tantrum." Before I could respond, Michael joined us, his expression tense. "Sarah, let's not do this here." "Oh, come on, Michael. Let's see if Miranda can handle the truth for once," Sarah taunted. Michael turned to me, his eyes cold. "You should leave, Miranda. You're not wanted here." I stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious. This is my workplace. I have every right to be here." Sarah smirked. "Look at you, playing the victim as always. You're pathetic, Miranda." My anger boiled over. "I am not the one who slept with my sister's fiancé. I am not the one who lied and manipulated people. You are the pathetic ones." Michael stepped closer, his voice a low growl. "You need to watch your mouth, Miranda. You're walking on thin ice." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm not afraid of you, Michael, or my twisted sister." Just then, Mr. Anderson appeared, sensing the tension. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between us. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "Yes, Mr. Anderson, everything is fine. I was just leaving." As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on my back, but I held my head high. I wouldn't let them see how much they affected me. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that this was far from over. Michael and Sarah were determined to make my life difficult, but I was just as determined to stand my ground. I wouldn't let them break me, not again. The atmosphere in the team was tense. I felt the stares of my colleagues, heard their whispers, which became quieter as I passed by. Michael tried to tell everyone his version of events. It was painful, because I am a victim of that story, and from his words, I turned into a sophisticated sadist, because of which my sister suffered. My boss, Mr. Anderson, supported me, and that was the most important thing. Without his support, I would not have been able to work in such a toxic atmosphere. The only one who didn't know about all this was my father, but that dinner changed everything. Halfway through the meal, my dad, sensing my discomfort, quietly asked, "Miranda, you seem troubled. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, not sure if I should bring it up, but I needed answers. "It's about Sarah and Michael," I began, my voice low. "They've been telling everyone that I caused Sarah's miscarriage, that the stress from the wedding was too much for her." Dad's expression changed, a mix of concern and something else, hesitation maybe. "Miranda, as a doctor, I'm bound by medical ethics, but you're my daughter, and you deserve the truth." I leaned in, my heart pounding. "What truth, Dad?" He took a deep breath. "Sarah came to me a while back. She was having trouble getting pregnant. But Miranda, she didn't have a miscarriage. She had an abortion. She chose to end the pregnancy herself." The words hit me like a physical blow. An abortion? But why would she lie about that? Dad shook his head, his expression pained. "I don't know, Miranda, but she was very clear about her decision." The room seemed to spin around me. Sarah's lies, the deceit, it was deeper than I ever imagined. I felt a surge of anger, not just at her, but at myself for believing her, for letting her words hurt me. I excused myself from the table, my mind racing. I couldn't confront Sarah or Michael, not yet. I needed a plan, a way to expose her lies without causing more drama. It had to be cunning, something that would reveal the truth in a way they couldn't deny. As I drove back home, ideas started to form in my mind. Sarah had played us all for fools, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. It was time to turn the tables. Armed with the truth about Sarah, I knew I had to act smart. I couldn't just blurt out what I knew. It needed to be strategic, undeniable. That's when the idea of a sting operation came to me. I remembered hearing about a private investigator, a woman reputed for her skill in uncovering truths people wanted to keep buried. I decided to meet her. "Miss Thompson, I understand you need my services," the PI, a woman named Rita, said as we sat in her inconspicuous office. "Yes, it's about my stepsister, Sarah. She's lied about something significant, and I need proof," I explained, trying to keep my emotions in check. Rita leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "What kind of proof are we talking about?" She claimed she had a miscarriage caused by stress I supposedly inflicted, but I know for a fact it was an abortion, I said, feeling a twinge of anger at the memory. Rita nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. "People slip up, especially when they think they're in a safe space. You said she likes to drink at a bar on weekends?" "Yes, she's there almost every Saturday," I confirmed. "Good. I'll befriend her there. If she's as loose-lipped as you say when she's drunk, it shouldn't be too hard to get her to spill the truth," Rita said confidently. The following week was agonizing. I waited, hoping Rita would come through. Then, on Tuesday morning, she called me. "I got it, Miranda. Sarah spilled everything during a drunken rant. It's all on tape." I met Rita that evening to listen to the recording. Hearing Sarah's voice, slurring and boasting about how she fooled everyone, how the baby was never Michael's, and how she never wanted it, sent chills down my spine. "Everyone thinks I'm this poor little girl who lost her baby. Idiots! It was just a fling, and there was no way I was having a black guy's baby." Sarah's voice echoed in the room. I felt a mix of vindication and disgust. "Rita, this is exactly what I needed. How can I ever thank you?" "Just seeing justice served is enough for me," Rita replied, a small smile on her face. Now armed with the truth, I knew it was time to confront Sarah and Michael. But I wanted to be careful. to reveal the truth in a way that left no room for doubt or further lies. I planned to invite them to a neutral place, somewhere public where they couldn't cause a scene. The day of the confrontation, my nerves were on edge, but I felt a sense of empowerment too. This was it, the moment of truth. The day had come to confront Sarah and Michael with the truth. My heart was racing as I sat in the corner of the coffee shop, waiting for them to arrive. I had chosen this place for its public setting, hoping it would keep emotions in check. Sarah walked in first, her usual confident self, followed by Michael, who looked unsure. They sat down opposite me, Sarah's eyes narrowing slightly. "So, Miranda, what's so important that you dragged us here? Do you finally want to apologize and get out of the company?" I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the envelope containing the recording. "I know everything, Sarah." Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "What are you talking about, Miranda?" Michael looked between us, confused. "Sarah, what is she talking about?" I pushed the envelope across the table. "I hired a private investigator. She recorded Sarah admitting everything at a bar. It wasn't a miscarriage. She lied." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and then her gaze turned to one of malice. "You sneaky little—" Michael cut her off, his voice shaking. "Is it true, Sarah? Did you lie to me?" Sarah opened and closed her mouth, looking like a fish out of water. Finally, she slumped back in her chair, defeated. "Yes, it's true. I had an abortion. The baby wasn't yours." Michael looked like he had been punched in the gut. He turned to me. "Miranda, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I'll file for divorce, and maybe we—" I looked at him, feeling a strange sense of detachment. "Your apology doesn't change what happened, Michael, but at least now you know the truth." Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "This isn't over, Miranda. You'll regret this." But I didn't feel scared. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. "The truth is out, Sarah. There's nothing left to hide." As they left the coffee shop, keeping their distance from each other, I remained seated, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was finally over. The lies, the deceit, the pain, it was all out in the open. The next day at work, word had spread about the confrontation. Colleagues who had once looked at me with pity and contempt now greeted me with respect. Mr. Anderson called me into his office, a look of concern on his face. "Miranda, I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" he asked, genuine worry in his tone. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. "Yes, Mr. Anderson, I'm more than okay. I'm free." As I walked back to my desk, I felt a new sense of purpose. I had faced my demons, and I had come out stronger. My past no longer defined me. I was ready to move on, to build a future on my terms. My name's Melly, and I guess you could say my life turned upside down when I met Alex. We clicked instantly at the accounting firm where we both worked, and before I knew it, we were planning a wedding. I was over the moon, of course, but meeting his family, that was a whole different ballgame. Alex always talked about his mom, Mrs. Donovan, with such admiration. So, the day we were supposed to meet her for dinner, I was a bundle of nerves, smoothing down my simple blue dress and double-checking my reflection for the umpteenth time. "Relax, Melly, she's going to love you," Alex assured me as we drove to his childhood home. But the moment we walked through the door, Mrs. Donovan's eyes narrowed as she looked me up and down. "Well, you're certainly slender, aren't you?" she remarked, her tone cool. I tried to laugh it off. "I guess I am. Never been much of an eater." Mrs. Donovan hummed, her expression unreadable. "I hope you're taking care of yourself. A woman should have some robustness, you know." Alex, bless him, jumped in. "Mom, Melly's just fine. She's healthy." Dinner was an uncomfortable affair. Mrs. Donovan's eyes were constantly on me, making me squirm every time I took a bite. I could feel her judging my every move. The worst part came when I excused myself to the restroom. As I passed the living room, I overheard Mrs. Donovan whispering to her sister, "She looks sickly. How will she bear Alex's healthy children?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The rest of the evening was a blur. I barely touched my food and struggled to keep a smile plastered on my face. On the drive back, I was quiet, the words echoing in my mind. Alex noticed. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet since dinner." I sighed. "It's nothing. Just tired, I guess." But inside, I was reeling. Mrs. Donovan's words had cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I wondered if this was just the beginning of a long road of judgment and disapproval. Little did I know, it was only the tip of the iceberg. As the days turned into weeks, the dinners at Mrs. Donovan's became a regular ordeal. Each invitation felt like a summons, each meal a trial. Alex, ever the optimist, kept reassuring me that things would get better, but they only seemed to worsen. One particular evening stands out in my memory. We arrived at Mrs. Donovan's to find an even more extravagant spread than usual. The dining table was overflowing with dishes, rich gravies, fatty roasts, and sides heavy with butter and cream. As soon as we sat down, Mrs. Donovan was on the offensive. "Melly, you look even thinner than last time. You really should eat more," she said, piling my plate high with food. I tried to protest. "Oh, Mrs. Donovan, this is too much. I really can't." "Nonsense," she cut me off. "You need to build some strength, dear. Especially if you and Alex are planning a family." I forced a smile and took a bite. Mrs. Donovan's eyes flickered with something like triumph. I glanced at Alex, hoping for some support, but he just shrugged apologetically. I felt my stomach knot up, not just from the rich food, but from the undercurrent of criticism in her words. Dinner progressed with painful slowness. Mrs. Donovan kept pushing more food my way, commenting on every bite I took, or didn't take. "You know, Melly, a good wife should know how to cook hearty meals. It's important for a family." I felt a sting at her words. "I do cook, Mrs. Donovan, but I prefer healthier options." She scoffed. "Healthy is fine, but this," she gestured at my barely touched plate, "is just pickiness. You're setting a bad example." By the end of the meal, I was both nauseous and seething with anger. The drive home was tense. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Alex, your mom's comments are really hurtful. It's like she's constantly judging me." Alex was silent for a moment before responding. "I know, Melly. I'll talk to her, okay? I'm sure she doesn't mean it the way it sounds." But a part of me doubted that anything would change. Mrs. Donovan had made her feelings clear, and no amount of talking seemed to soften her stance. Each subsequent dinner only reinforced my feelings of inadequacy. Mrs. Donovan's remarks became more pointed, her scrutiny more intense. "Melly, are you avoiding my food deliberately? You barely eat anything I make." I tried to explain. "It's not that, Mrs. Donovan. Your food is very rich, and it doesn't always agree with me." She tutted disapprovingly. "A little discomfort is nothing. You need to eat more, put on some weight. It's not healthy to be so thin." Her words echoed in my head long after each dinner, amplifying my insecurities and doubts. The thought of facing another meal at her house filled me with dread. My relationship with Alex was strong, but the shadow of his mother's disapproval loomed over us, a constant, unsettling presence. As I lay awake many nights, I wondered how long I could endure this. The discomfort in my stomach after each meal was a stark reminder of the growing discomfort in my heart. I felt like an outsider, unwelcome and misunderstood, and I couldn't help but worry about the future of our relationship under the weight of his mother's judgment. As the days rolled into weeks, my unease around Mrs. Donovan turned into outright dread. The constant scrutiny, the endless comments about my weight and eating habits, it was all becoming too much. So I made a decision, one that I knew wouldn't sit well with her. I started avoiding meals at her house. The next time Alex mentioned going over for dinner, I hesitated before speaking up. "Alex, I don't think I can go tonight." He looked surprised. "Why not? Mom's making that roast you liked." I took a deep breath. "It's not about the food. It's... Your mom makes me uncomfortable. I can't keep pretending it's okay." Alex's face fell. "Melly, she's just trying to be caring in her own way. She doesn't mean to upset you." I shook my head, frustration building up. "It's not caring, Alex. It feels like she's attacking me, always commenting on how I look, what I eat. I can't deal with it anymore." We left it at that, but I could tell Alex was torn. He wanted to keep the peace, but I needed him to understand my side. The next family dinner I missed set off a real storm. Mrs. Donovan called me the next day, her voice icy. "Melly, I noticed you didn't grace us with your presence last night. Is everything all right?" I tried to keep my tone neutral. "Yes, Mrs. Donovan, I just wasn't feeling up to it." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Not feeling up to it? You do realize it's rude to decline family dinners without a good reason. You're part of this family now, or so I thought." Her words stung, and I felt my patience snap. "With all due respect, Mrs. Donovan, being part of this family shouldn't mean I have to endure being criticized all the time." There was a moment of stunned silence before she retorted, "Criticism? I'm merely concerned about your health, Melly. A wife should be strong, healthy. I'm worried you're not suitable for Alex." That hit a nerve. Suitable? I love Alex and he loves me. That's what matters, not your opinion on my health. The conversation ended soon after, but the damage was done. The rift between us grew wider, deeper. Alex tried to mediate, but his attempts only made things worse. One evening, as we sat quietly in our living room, he broached the subject. "Melly, I spoke to Mom. She's really upset. She thinks you're avoiding her." I let out a bitter laugh. "Avoiding her? She's been nothing but harsh and judgmental since day one. What does she expect?" Alex ran a hand through his hair, looking exasperated. "She's my mom, Melly. I can't just ignore her. Can't you two try to work things out?" I looked at him, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "Alex, it's not about working things out, it's about respect. She doesn't respect me, and I don't know if I can keep pretending it doesn't hurt." The wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and it was, at least until the reception. Everything was perfect. The ceremony, the vows, Alex looking at me like I was the only one in the room. But then, at the reception, everything changed. I remember holding a glass of wine, the same wine everyone else was drinking. It tasted a bit off, but I figured it was just nerves. I took a sip, and that's the last thing I remember before waking up in a stark, white hospital room. Confused and groggy, I tried to sit up. That's when I heard them, Alex and his mom, just outside my room. Mrs. Donovan's voice was sharp. "See what I mean, Alex? She can't even handle a simple toast. She's too weak, too fragile for our family." I felt a pang of hurt, but I was too weak to respond. Alex's voice, full of worry, cut through. "Mom, stop it. This isn't the time. We don't even know what happened." I wanted to shout, to tell them I was okay, that I wasn't weak. But my voice was a mere whisper. Then the door opened, and a doctor walked in, a serious look on his face. "Mrs. Donovan," he said, addressing me, "you gave us quite a scare. We found traces of a sedative in your system. Did you take anything before the ceremony?" I shook my head weakly. "No, nothing. Just the wine." The doctor frowned. "The wine? But no one else had this reaction. It's very unusual." Alex stepped in, his face etched with concern. "Doctor, are you saying someone might have tampered with her drink?" The doctor hesitated. "It's a possibility we can't ignore. We'll need to run some more tests." I lay there, stunned. Someone had drugged me? On my wedding day? But who? And why? As the doctor left to arrange the tests, Alex came to my side, taking my hand. "Melly, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this is happening." I tried to smile, to reassure him, but my mind was racing. The only thing I could taste was the bitterness of the wine and Mrs. Donovan's harsh words echoing in my head. That night in the hospital, I couldn't sleep. The realization that someone might have deliberately hurt me was terrifying, and the worst part was not knowing who or why. I looked over at Alex, asleep in the chair next to my bed, and felt a wave of sadness. Our wedding day was supposed to be about us, our love. Instead, it ended with me in a hospital bed, surrounded by suspicion and fear. Back home from the hospital, I was a bundle of nerves. The thought that someone had drugged me at my own wedding was like a dark cloud hanging over me. And deep down, I had a gnawing suspicion about who it might be. One evening, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Alex and I were sitting in the living room, the TV playing some show neither of us was watching. I turned to him, my voice shaky. Alex, I need to talk to you about something serious. He muted the TV, looking concerned. What's up, Melly? I took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what happened at the wedding, and I can't shake off the feeling that your mom might have had something to do with it. Alex's face changed instantly. What? Melly, that's crazy talk. Why would you even think that? I could feel my frustration mounting. Think about it, Alex. All those comments, the way she's always on my case, and then I suddenly fall ill after drinking wine that tasted odd? It's not that far-fetched. Alex stood up, pacing the room. Melly, you're talking about my mom. She can be tough, sure, but she wouldn't do something like that. You're letting your imagination run wild. I stood up too, my voice rising. Am I, Alex? Or have you just been turning a blind eye to all the things she's said and done? Can't you see she doesn't like me? He stopped pacing, looking pained. Melly, this is serious. Accusing someone of drugging you, that's a big deal. You can't just throw around accusations without proof. I felt tears prick my eyes. I thought you'd at least consider what I'm saying, but it seems like you'll always take her side. Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not about taking sides, Melly. It's about being rational. We can't accuse people based on a hunch. I felt a mix of anger and disappointment. So, what am I supposed to do? Just forget it happened? He came over, trying to put his arm around me, but I stepped back. We need to think this through, Melly. Maybe talk to the police again, see if they found anything new. I nodded, though I felt far from convinced. Fine, we'll talk to them. But Alex, if it turns out I'm right, I don't know what I'll do. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept going back to Mrs. Donovan, her words, her looks. The doubt and fear were like a poison, and I knew I had to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. A couple of weeks after the hospital incident, we were invited to another family gathering at Mrs. Donovan's house. I was hesitant to go, but Alex insisted it would be good for us to show a united front. As we walked into Mrs. Donovan's house, the atmosphere was tense. I could feel eyes on me, whispering under their breath. Mrs. Donovan greeted us with a smile. Melly, dear, so glad you could make it, she said, her voice dripping with something that didn't quite sound like sincerity. I forced a smile back. Thank you for having us, Mrs. Donovan. Dinner was served, and I noticed Mrs. Donovan made a point of bringing me a separate dish. I made this especially for you, Melly, considering your delicate condition. Her emphasis on delicate didn't go unnoticed. I eyed the dish warily. It looked normal, but after the wedding, I couldn't be sure. Alex, oblivious to my discomfort, started eating his meal. I pushed the food around my plate, my appetite gone. Mrs. Donovan watched me, a hint of a smirk on her face. Not hungry, Melly? I made it just for you. I looked up, meeting her gaze. I'm just not feeling all that well, Mrs. Donovan, but thank you. The room was filled with murmurs and side glances. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, judging, questioning. Alex, noticing my discomfort, leaned in. You okay? I nodded, but my mind was racing. What if she had done something to the food again? I couldn't take any chances. I whispered to Alex, Can we switch plates? I'm not comfortable eating this. He looked confused, but obliged, swapping our plates. As he reached for a bite of my food, Mrs. Donovan's hand shot out, stopping him. No, Alex, don't! She exclaimed, her voice laced with panic. The room went silent. Everyone's eyes were now on her. Alex looked up, startled. Mom? What's wrong? Mrs. Donovan's face had lost all color. She stammered, looking for an excuse. It's just... That dish is specially made for Melly. It's not to everyone's taste. I stared at her, my suspicions growing stronger. Why not, Mrs. Donovan? What's in it that's so special? She fumbled for words, her usual composure slipping away. It's just a special recipe. The tension in the room was palpable. Alex looked between his mother and me, confusion turning to realization. Mom, what did you do? Mrs. Donovan was silent, her eyes darting around the room. I knew then, without a doubt, that my suspicions were right. There was something in that food, something she didn't want Alex to eat. The room was heavy with tension following the incident with the plates. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, on Mrs. Donovan, who looked like she was caught in a trap. Alex, his face a mix of anger and disbelief, turned to his mother. "Mom, what's going on? Why did you freak out about me eating Melly's food?" Mrs. Donovan was fumbling for words, her usual poise nowhere to be seen. "It's nothing, just... It was made for Melly, not for you." I couldn't hold back anymore. "That's not good enough, Mrs. Donovan. You've been against me from the start. What did you put in my food?" The room erupted into murmurs. Mrs. Donovan's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. "I didn't put anything in your food, Melly. This is ridiculous." I stood up, my hands trembling. "It's not ridiculous. Ever since I started coming to these dinners, I've felt sick. And then the wedding. Someone drugged my drink, and now this? It's too much of a coincidence." Alex stood up too, his voice firm. "Mom, if you did something to Melly's food, you need to tell us now. This is serious." Mrs. Donovan's face crumpled. I just wanted to protect you, Alex. She's not right for you. She's weak, sickly." I felt a surge of anger. Protect him? By making me sick? By drugging me? The guests were now openly staring, the air thick with accusation and shock. Alex's uncle, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "This is a serious accusation, Melly. Do you have any proof?" I pointed to my plate. "I'm calling the police, and they will give the food prepared by Mrs. Donovan for examination." And then Mrs. Donovan burst into tears. "I just wanted the best for my son. I thought if she was out of the picture, he'd find someone better, someone healthier." The confession hung in the air, heavy and damning. Alex looked at his mother, his expression one of utter betrayal. "You did this to Melly? My wife?" I felt a mix of relief and despair. Relief that the truth was out, but despair at the cost. My relationship with Alex, our place in his family, everything was in shambles. The rest of the evening was a haze. There were arguments, people taking sides, some in disbelief, others in anger. Alex and I left early, the weight of what had happened bearing down on us. As we drove home, neither of us spoke. The silence was oppressive, filled with unasked questions and unspoken fears. What did this mean for us? For our future? The woman who was supposed to be my family had betrayed me in the worst way, and the fallout was something neither Alex nor I were prepared to handle. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. Mrs. Donovan's confession, the look of shock on Alex's face, the whispers of the guests. The confrontation had brought the truth to light, but it had also opened a wound that I wasn't sure could ever fully heal. One evening, as Alex and I sat together, the silence between us felt particularly profound. Breaking the stillness, I turned to Alex. "We need to talk about what's next, about the police." He looked at me, his expression solemn yet supportive. "I've been thinking about that too. It's your decision, Melly. I'll back you up, whatever you choose." I mulled over the thought, feeling the weight of the decision on my shoulders. It's just, going to the police feels like opening a Pandora's box. It's not just about exposing what happened, it's about airing family issues in public. He nodded understandingly. "I know it's hard, but remember, you're the one who's been wronged. If you want to pursue this legally, I'm with you." After a pause, I let out a deep breath. "No, I don't think I want to go down that road, but there's something else I've decided." I hesitated, gathering my courage. "I can't see your mother again, Alex. After everything, I can't." Alex's reaction was quiet, contemplative. "I understand. And honestly, I feel the same. After what she did, I can't just carry on as if nothing's happened. I won't see her either." His words were a relief, a validation of my feelings. "It's going to be hard, Alex. She's your mother." He squeezed my hand, firm and reassuring. "I know, but what she did, it's unforgivable. Our relationship, our marriage, comes first." In the days that followed, we both stood by our decision. It was a difficult period, adjusting to this new reality where Mrs. Donovan was no longer a part of our lives. There were moments of doubt, of questioning whether we were too harsh, but we supported each other through them. We started focusing more on ourselves, on rebuilding and strengthening our bond. We made plans for the future, small things to look forward to, like weekend getaways and quiet evenings together. As we moved forward, I realized that this ordeal, as painful as it was, had brought us closer. We had faced a challenge together, one that tested the very foundation of our relationship and had come out stronger. I never thought juggling cameras, kids, and a calendar crammed with appointments would be my daily circus. But here I am, at 39, a freelance photographer with a life that's always a click away from chaos. My name's Sarah, and my world revolves around two things: my camera lens and my family. My husband, Mike, is the kind of guy who's married to his job. He works as a sales rep for a company with branches across 3 cities. I can't remember the last time we had a meal together without him rushing off or being glued to his laptop. And then, there are our kids, Lily and Max, both in school, and a whirlwind of activities and homework. "Mama, have you seen my math book?" Lily's voice snaps me back from my thoughts as I sort through my camera gear. "It's probably under the pile of clothes in your room," I reply, without looking up. Max runs in, his soccer ball thumping against the walls. "Mom, can you sign this form for my field trip?" "Sure, bud. Just give me a minute," I say, balancing a camera in one hand and the form in the other. As the kids dash off to their rooms, I hear the front door open and close. Mike's home, probably just to grab something and dash off again. His presence in the house has become like a cameo appearance in a long-running show. "Hey, Mike, how was your day?" I ask, not expecting much of a conversation. Same old, just tired. Got another trip tomorrow," he says, barely looking up from his phone. "I was thinking maybe this weekend we could do something as a family. You know, take the kids out or something," I suggest, hoping for a change. "Yeah, maybe. I'll see how it goes," he replies, his attention still on his phone. I sigh, realizing it's a lost cause. It's always maybe or we'll see. The kids and I have become experts at filling in the blanks of his absence. The evening rolls on with the usual routine: dinner, homework, bedtime stories, and finally, some quiet. I sit on the porch, my camera by my side, capturing the night sky. It's my moment of peace, a brief escape from the relentless pace of life. But who am I kidding? Even in these quiet moments, my mind races with tomorrow's to-do list, unanswered emails, and the ever-looming question, when will things change? As I head back inside, I make a mental note to check my schedule for next week. It's a balancing act, and I'm the ringmaster of my own chaotic circus. But in this hustle and bustle, I often wonder, when did life become a series of tasks to tick off rather than moments to live? Life as a freelance photographer is never predictable, but nothing prepared me for the curveball I was about to receive. It was just another Wednesday morning, and I was out for a walk with our dog, Buster. The sun was shining, but my mind was cloudy with thoughts of upcoming projects and deadlines. "Come on, Buster, let's make this quick. Mommy's got a ton of editing to do," I muttered, tugging slightly at his leash. Just as we turned the corner near the park, Buster spotted a cat, and in a split second, everything went haywire. He lunged forward, pulling the leash with such force that I lost my balance and fell hard onto the pavement. "Ow! Buster, stop!" I yelled, but he was too busy chasing the cat to notice. I tried to get up, but a sharp pain shot through my leg. Great, just what I needed. Limping back home, I called Mike. "Hey, I think I hurt my leg. Can you come home early?" "Sarah, I'm in a meeting. Can it wait?" His voice was curt, a clear sign of his irritation. "I just fell, Mike. It's not like I'm calling for fun," I snapped, frustration boiling over. "Fine, I'll see what I can do," he replied, and the line went dead. After what felt like an eternity, I made it home. The pain was getting worse. I knew I had to see a doctor, but with Mike's unpredictable schedule and the kids at school, it was a logistical nightmare. The diagnosis was a fractured leg. Great. Just what I needed on top of everything else. The doctor advised rest, meaning no shoots, no chasing after the kids, nothing. As if my life wasn't chaotic enough. Back home, with my leg in a cast, I felt like a bird trapped in a cage. Mike had to take over some of my duties, which he did with an obvious lack of enthusiasm. "This is a real mess, Sarah. How long till you're back on your feet?" Mike asked, his tone more concerned with the inconvenience than my pain. "A few weeks at least. It's not like I planned this, you know," I retorted, my patience wearing thin. The kids were surprisingly helpful, though. Lily took over some of the house chores, and Max tried his best to be less of a tornado around the house. "Mom, can I get you anything?" Lily asked, her concern genuine. "Just some peace would be nice," I replied with a tired smile. Days turned into weeks. I was stuck at home, my world reduced to the four walls of our living room. Mike was out most of the time, and the kids were busy with school. The loneliness was suffocating. In a desperate attempt to find something to occupy my time, I decided to explore photography forums online. Little did I know, this decision would turn my world upside down. Stuck at home with my leg in a cast, I found myself diving deeper into the world of online photography forums. It was a nice distraction, scrolling through endless galleries of beautiful images. It almost made me forget the throbbing pain in my leg. Almost. One evening, while mindlessly browsing, something caught my eye. A photo of a man proposing to a young woman. The scene was picturesque, but it wasn't the romantic setting that grabbed my attention. It was the man in the photo. He looked exactly like Mike, my husband. Same build, same hair, even the same suit that I had bought him last Christmas. "No, this can't be," I murmured to myself, my heart pounding. "It just looks like him, that's all." But the more I looked at it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling. It was more than just a resemblance. I had to know more. I messaged the photographer, a woman named Jenna. "Hi Jenna, I came across your photo of the marriage proposal. Can you tell me more about it? Where was it taken?" Jenna replied quickly. "Sure, that was taken in Riverdale. Lovely couple. Why do you ask?" I hesitated, not sure how to explain without sounding paranoid. "I was just curious. The man in the photo looks a lot like someone I know." I waited anxiously for her response, hoping she'd offer more information. But instead, she went silent. No reply came. Days passed, and the image haunted me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time Mike came home, I studied his face, looking for any sign of guilt, any hint of betrayal. But he was his usual detached self, buried in his phone or laptop. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted him. "Mike, have you ever been to Riverdale on your business trips?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, a few times. Why?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "No reason. Just asking," I said, my voice trembling. The uncertainty was eating me alive. I had to know. I messaged Jenna again, this time more directly. "Jenna, I need to know. The man in your proposal photo, can you send me more shots of him? I think he might be my husband." This time, Jenna responded, "I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's against my policy to share personal photos without my client's consent." I pleaded, explaining my situation and my growing suspicions. After what felt like an eternity, Jenna finally relented. "Okay, I understand. I'll send you a few more shots, but please keep this between us." When the photos arrived, my heart sank. There he was, my Mike, down on one knee, holding a ring to a woman I had never seen before. The same loving gaze he once gave me was now directed at her. I sat there, staring at the screen, tears streaming down my face. My world, my marriage, everything I believed in, shattered in an instant. I never imagined myself in the role of a woman who'd hire a private detective. Yet, there I was, sitting across from Rick, a seasoned investigator with a face that didn't give anything away. I handed him photos of Mike and a list of cities he frequently visited. "I need to know what he's doing on these trips," I said, my voice a strange mix of fear and resolve. Rick nodded, his eyes scanning the photos. "I'll track his movements, see who he meets, but it's going to take some time. You okay with that?" I was far from okay, but I nodded. "I need the truth," was all I could muster. As Rick delved into his investigation, I was forced into a role I never wanted. the wife who pretends everything is normal. Mike, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued his business trips, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts. I started noticing changes in Mike that I'd never seen before. His wardrobe underwent a transformation, suits that screamed designer labels, shoes that weren't from our usual budget stores. His cologne was different too, replaced by a scent that was more refined, more luxurious. These were subtle changes, but to me, they were glaring. Then there were the phone calls. Mike had always been private with his phone, but now it was excessive. He'd lock himself in the bathroom, speaking in hushed tones. I once pressed my ear against the door, trying to catch snippets of his conversation, but all I could hear was the muffled sound of his voice. I watched him closely, trying to find traces of the man I married in his new persona. But with every passing day, he seemed more like a stranger. I wondered how long he had been living this double life, right under my nose. The kids started to notice the tension. Lily, ever perceptive, asked one night, "Mom, is everything okay with you and Dad?" I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just a lot on my mind with work." But it wasn't fine. The man I shared my bed with, the father of my children, felt like a mirage. I found myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, piecing together the lies and half-truths. One evening, as Mike prepared for another trip, I found myself watching him pack. He moved with such ease, a routine he had mastered. There was no hesitation, no signs of guilt. It struck me then, how easy it is to deceive someone who trusts you completely. I reflected on our years together, wondering when the lies began. Had I been naive, too trusting? Or had I chosen to ignore the signs, too wrapped up in my own world? Weeks went by, and Rick finally called. "We need to meet." His voice was serious, carrying a weight that made my heart sink. We met at a quiet corner of a nearly empty cafe. He slid a thick envelope across the table. "I found quite a bit. You sure you're ready for this?" I wasn't sure of anything anymore, but I nodded. Inside the envelope were photos, receipts, and detailed reports. Every piece of evidence was like a knife twisting in my heart. There he was, my Mike, but not the Mike I knew. In each city, there was a different woman, a different life. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. My mind raced with questions. How could he do this? How long had he been living this lie? I paid Rick, barely speaking as I left. Walking home, the envelope felt like it weighed a ton. I realized then that all this while, I had been living with my eyes closed. I had refused to see the man Mike had become, clinging to the image of the husband I thought I knew. Now, with my eyes wide open, I saw everything clearly. The lies, the deceit, the reality of my marriage laid bare. It was a truth I couldn't run from anymore. Holding on to the truth about Mike's infidelities was like keeping a storm inside me. But I kept the photos a secret. I wasn't going to let him off easy. No, he deserved more than just a confrontation. He deserved a reckoning. I wanted to give him an unpleasant surprise, one that he'd remember for the rest of his life. As the days passed, my leg finally healed. I could walk without wincing in pain, a small victory that felt like a fresh start. But as one part of me healed, another part plotted revenge. Mike continued his routine, unaware of the storm brewing under his nose. He left for his trips and came back, slipping further into his web of lies. He thought he was smart, but he didn't know that I was now playing the game too. I crafted a plan, something that would expose his deceit in the most dramatic way possible. I wasn't going to tip my hand by letting him know what I knew. No, this had to be a surprise. I spent hours thinking, planning, making sure every detail was perfect. I watched him, pretending everything was normal, but inside, I was counting down the days. My heart had turned cold, each beat a reminder of his betrayal. Finally, everything was in place. The trap was set, and all I had to do was wait for the right moment. Mike was oblivious, still wrapped up in his lies, thinking he had fooled me. He had no idea what was coming. As I lay in bed that night, the phrase, "Revenge is a dish best served cold," echoed in my mind. I realized that was exactly what I was doing, serving him his just desserts, cold and unyielding. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about taking back my life from someone who thought he could play me for a fool. The night I planned to confront Mike was etched in my mind like a date with destiny. I cooked his favorite meal, set the table with our best china, and even put on the dress he always said he liked. It was all a facade, a stage set for the final act. Mike walked in, looking tired but surprised at the effort I'd put in. "Wow, what's all this for?" he asked, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Just felt like doing something special," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. We sat down, and for a while, I played the part of the doting wife. We talked about mundane things, but I was just biding my time, waiting for the right moment. The doorbell rang, and that was my cue. "Can you get that, honey?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Mike got up, still unsuspecting, and walked to the door. I heard his footsteps, the door opening, and then a moment of silence before his voice, laced with shock. "What are you doing here?" I walked to the doorway, and there they were, the girl from the photos and her parents. The look on Mike's face was priceless, a mix of shock, fear, and confusion. "Sarah, what is this?" Mike turned to me, his voice a mix of accusation and panic. "This is me, giving you a taste of your own medicine," I said, my voice cold and sharp. The girl, tears in her eyes, confronted Mike. "You said you loved me, that we were going to be together." Her parents were furious, demanding answers, their voices raised in anger. Mike tried to speak, but words seemed to fail him. "You've been living a lie, Mike, and I have all the proof," I said, holding up the envelope Rick had given me. Mike's face went from red to pale. He looked at me, then at the girl and her parents, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You're a liar and a cheat," I spat out, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. The room was filled with shouting, accusations flying. Mike tried to explain, to apologize, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back. As the girl and her parents left, the reality of what had just happened seemed to sink in for Mike. He looked at me, his eyes searching for something, maybe forgiveness or understanding. But all I felt was disgust. "You need to leave," I said, my voice void of emotion. He didn't argue, just packed a few things and left. The house was suddenly quiet, the echoes of the confrontation still hanging in the air. The days following the confrontation were a blur. The house, once filled with the noise of our family, now echoed with a haunting silence. I kept busy, trying to distract myself from the emptiness and the hurt. Lily and Max knew something was wrong. They could sense the change in the air, the absence of their father's presence. I sat them down one evening, knowing I had to explain things, even if it broke my heart. "Kids, your dad and we're going to be living apart for a while," I said, my voice trembling. "Why, Mom? Did we do something wrong?" Max's innocent eyes searched mine for answers. "No, honey, it's not you. It's just, Dad made some mistakes and we need some time apart," I tried to explain without revealing too much. Lily, older and more perceptive, understood more than I wished she would. "Is Dad not coming back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, sweetheart," I replied, holding back my own tears. I started the divorce proceedings, a process that was both liberating and soul-crushing. Mike tried to reach out, sending messages of apology, of wanting to talk. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The legal battles began. I fought for the house, for alimony, for everything we had built together. It was a messy, painful process, but I was determined to get what we deserved. One day, I was going through some old boxes and found a photo of Mike and me on our wedding day. I stared at it, at the happy, hopeful faces we once were. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Why did he do it, Mom? Why did Dad hurt us?" Max asked, coming into the room. I put the photo down, looking at my son. "Sometimes people make bad choices, Max, and those choices hurt the people they love." "But do you still love Dad?" he asked, his eyes full of confusion. I sighed, a mix of sadness and resignation in my heart. "I don't know, Max. I'm just trying to figure out what's best for us now." The weeks turned into months. The divorce was finalized, leaving me with a mix of relief and a deep sense of loss. I started focusing more on my photography, taking on more assignments. It was a way to rebuild, to find myself again. One evening, Lily came to me. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I hugged her, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "Yes, we are. We're going to be just fine." Life didn't stop after the divorce. If anything, it kept moving at a relentless pace. The kids and I settled into a new routine, finding our footing in this altered reality. We were a team, the three of us, facing each day with a mix of resilience and hope. As for Mike, I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine. His world, it seemed, was unraveling at the seams. The women he deceived banded together, filing a collective lawsuit against him. The scandal spilled over into his work, leading to a demotion. He was drowning in debts and legal troubles. But that part of my life was behind me. I had more pressing, more pleasant things to focus on. One sunny afternoon, while I was setting up for a family photo shoot in a park, Lily called me. Her voice was bright, filled with excitement. "Mom, guess what? I won first place in the art competition." "That's wonderful, Lily. I'm so proud of you," I replied, my heart swelling with pride. Max, too, was thriving. He had found a passion for soccer and was making new friends on the team. "Mom, you should come to my game this Saturday. I might score a goal," he said one evening, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. Life with the kids was busy, filled with school events, soccer matches, and art exhibitions. We were a tight unit, supporting each other through thick and thin. My photography business was also picking up. I landed a few big contracts, photographing events, and doing portrait sessions. The lens was my window to the world, allowing me to capture moments of joy, of life moving forward. One evening, as I sat editing photos, I reflected on the past months. The pain of betrayal, the turmoil of the divorce, it all seemed like a distant memory now. I had found strength I didn't know I possessed. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was my friend and neighbor Martha, dropping by with some coffee and a friendly smile. "How are you holding up?" she asked as we sat in the living room. "I'm doing okay, actually. Better than okay," I replied, a sense of contentment washing over me. "That's great to hear. You know, you've really inspired me with your strength," Martha said, her eyes sincere. We chatted for a while, talking about work, life, and everything in between. It was nice to have a friend who understood my journey. As Martha left, I looked around my home, filled with laughter, love, and the evidence of a life moving forward. The hardships had not defined us. Instead, they had forged us into something stronger. Life was good, not perfect, but good. And for now, that was more than enough. I never thought I'd be here, sitting in the living room of what used to be our house, feeling like a stranger in my own life. My name is Emily, and just a few months ago, I was living what I thought was a happy life with my husband, Mark. We were the couple everyone envied, or so I believed. Mark, once a charming and attentive man, had become someone I hardly recognized. His once warm eyes now seemed cold and distant. It all changed after my dad passed away. Dad was my rock, and losing him felt like losing a part of myself. But for Mark, it seemed like an opportunity. The evening air was heavy as I sat across from Mark, the silence between us a stark contrast to the laughter and love that once filled this room. "Are you even listening to me, Emily?" Mark's voice, sharp and impatient, broke the silence. I looked up, meeting his gaze. "Yes, I'm listening," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's simple. I want a divorce. I've already talked to a lawyer. This house, it's mine. You need to start looking for somewhere else to live." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had sensed the growing distance between us, but divorce? I was speechless. "You can't be serious, Mark. After all these years, you're just going to throw everything away?" I finally managed to say, my voice tinged with disbelief. Mark leaned back in his chair, a cold, unfazed look on his face. "It's not just throwing away, Emily. It's moving on. I've been feeling trapped in this marriage, and now, with your dad gone, I see no reason to continue this charade." I felt a mixture of anger and heartbreak. How could he be so cruel, so heartless? My father was gone, and now Mark, The man I had loved and trusted was abandoning me too. I don't understand you, Mark. You used to be so different, so caring. What happened to us? Mark let out a sarcastic laugh. Oh, please. Spare me the drama, Emily. You should start packing. The sooner you're out, the better. I sat there, stunned and hurt, trying to process everything. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the shattering of an illusion. The illusion of a happy life that I had clung to for so long. And now I was alone, with nothing but memories of a love that turned out to be nothing but a facade. My life, already hanging by a thread, spiraled further into chaos with the arrival of Mrs. Harwood, Mark's mother. She moved in unannounced, bringing with her an air of hostility that choked the already tense atmosphere of the house. Emily, I expect you to behave appropriately while I'm here, Mrs. Harwood declared, her voice sharp as she settled into the living room, making it clear that she considered herself in charge. I tried to reason with her. Mrs. Harwood, I understand this is a difficult time for everyone, but I assure you, I have no intention of causing trouble. She fixed me with a cold stare. Trouble seems to follow you, dear. I've seen how you and Mark have been living. It's no wonder my son wants a divorce. Her words cut deep, but I wasn't about to let her walk over me. Mark and I are adults. We'll handle our matters ourselves. Your interference isn't needed. She scoffed. Interference? I'm protecting my son from your manipulative ways. You've done enough damage already. The days that followed were a blur of constant snide remarks and belittling comments from Mrs. Harwood. She criticized everything from the way I dressed to the way I cooked. It felt like she was trying to erase my presence from the house. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, she came into the kitchen. You're using too much salt. Don't you know anything about cooking? I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my cool. I've been cooking for myself and Mark for years. He's never complained. Well, he's too kind to say anything, but I'm not. You're ruining his health with your terrible cooking. I couldn't believe the audacity of this woman. Mrs. Harwood, I appreciate your concern, but I can manage. She leaned against the counter, watching me like a hawk. You can manage, can you? We'll see how long that lasts. Every interaction with her was an exercise in restraint. She had an opinion on everything and wasn't afraid to voice it, loudly and often. It was like she was trying to provoke me, to push me to my breaking point. Mark, for his part, did nothing to ease the tension. He avoided being in the same room with us, leaving me to fend for myself against his mother's relentless attacks. It was clear he had no intention of standing up for me, not anymore. One morning, as I sat at the breakfast table, Mrs. Harwood sat across from me, her eyes cold and calculating. You know, Emily, it's not too late to leave gracefully. You could save yourself a lot of trouble. I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. I have as much right to be here as you do, Mrs. Harwood. I'm not leaving until the divorce is finalized. She smirked. Stubborn, aren't you? Well, we'll see how long that lasts. Mark doesn't want you here, and neither do I. You're just a guest, and guests can be asked to leave. Her words echoed in my head, a constant reminder of the unwelcome and precarious position I found myself in. But I wasn't about to give up. I had to stand my ground, no matter how difficult Mrs. Harwood made it. The house had become a battleground, and I was determined not to be the one who surrendered. Living with Mrs. Harwood under the same roof was like walking on eggshells. But the day she crossed the line was when she targeted my cat, Whiskers. Whiskers was more than just a pet. He was a part of my world, a comfort in my loneliest times. I came home to find Mrs. Harwood standing in the hallway, a look of disgust on her face as she glared at Whiskers. That filthy animal, she spat. I want it out of my son's house. It's either the cat or you, Emily. I felt a surge of anger. Whiskers isn't going anywhere. He's part of this family. She sneered. That thing is a nuisance. I won't have it shedding and spreading germs all over. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He's a harmless cat, Mrs. Harwood. You're being unreasonable. She moved closer, her voice cold and harsh. Listen here, Emily. I call the shots now. Either that cat goes, or things will get very unpleasant for you. I knew arguing with her was futile. She had made up her mind, and nothing I said would change it. I had to think fast. That's when I remembered my friend Sarah, an animal lover who had always adored Whiskers. I called Sarah, my voice shaky. "Sarah, I need a huge favor. Can you look after Whiskers for a while? I'm in a bit of a situation here." Sarah was quick to respond. "Of course, Emily. What's going on? Are you okay?" I sighed. "It's a long story. I'll explain later. But thank you. You're a lifesaver." Packing Whiskers' things felt like a defeat, but I knew it was for the best. As I was about to leave with Whiskers, Mrs. Harwood blocked my path. "Finally, some sense," she said, a smug smile on her face. "I knew you'd do the right thing." I held back my anger. "This isn't over, Mrs. Harwood. I'm doing this for Whiskers, not for you." She laughed. "Oh, keep telling yourself that, dear, but we both know who's in charge here." One day, I found my clothes ruined. My favorite dress, my comfy sweaters, everything was bleached. It was no accident. I stormed into the living room where Mrs. Harwood was reading a magazine, looking too innocent. "Did you do this?" I held up the ruined dress, my voice shaking with anger. She looked up, feigning surprise. "Oh dear, what happened to your dress?" "Don't play dumb, Mrs. Harwood. You put bleach in the wash," I accused. She shrugged, a smirk creeping onto her face. "Oh, that. I was cleaning the machine. Must have forgotten to rinse it out. Accidents happen, dear." I was fuming. "This wasn't an accident. You did this on purpose." She leaned back, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Prove it, Emily. It's my word against yours, and we both know who my son will believe." I felt helpless and defeated. She was right. Mark would never take my side over his mother's. Later that day, I confronted Mark. "Your mother ruined my clothes. You need to talk to her." Mark didn't even look up from his phone. "Mom said it was an accident. Stop making a big deal out of everything." I couldn't believe his indifference. "She's doing this on purpose, Mark. Can't you see what she's doing?" He sighed, annoyed. "Look, Emily, I don't want to get involved. Just stay out of her way." Stay out of her way? This was supposed to be my home, too. I realized then that I was alone in this. Mark wouldn't help me. His mother was out to get me, and I had to fend for myself. The destruction of my clothes was just the beginning of Mrs. Harwood's campaign against me. Each day brought a new challenge, a new way for her to assert her dominance and make me feel unwelcome in my own home. I started to notice little things missing or out of place. My favorite mug cracked, my pictures taken down from the walls, small but personal attacks. It was a psychological game, and she was playing to win. One evening, I came home to find the living room in a mess. My books were scattered on the floor, pages torn. I confronted Mrs. Harwood, who was sitting calmly with a cup of tea. "Did you do this?" I asked, holding up a torn book. She glanced at it, then back at me, with a cold, indifferent expression. "Oh, those old things? I thought they were trash. You should be more careful about what you leave around." I was outraged. "These are my books, Mrs. Harwood. You have no right to touch them." She shrugged, unfazed. "This is my son's house. I'll do as I please. Maybe you should start packing your trash." I felt a burning anger, but also a sense of helplessness. Arguing with her was pointless. She had made it clear that she didn't respect me or my belongings. The next morning, I found my toiletries thrown in the trash. My shampoo, my face cream, everything gone. I dug them out, my hands shaking with anger. This was more than just petty sabotage. It was a declaration of war. I confronted Mark again. "Your mother threw away my toiletries. This has to stop." He barely glanced at me. "Maybe it was a mistake. Just buy new ones." "A mistake? She's doing this deliberately, Mark. Can't you see that?" I was near tears, frustrated by his continued indifference. He stood up, his voice cold. "I'm not getting into this, Emily. Sort it out with her." Sort it out with her? How was I supposed to sort out deliberate cruelty? I tried to keep to myself, to avoid Mrs. Harwood, but she seemed to take my avoidance as a challenge. She'd make loud, snide comments about me on the phone, ensuring I could hear every word. She'd accidentally spill things on the floor I'd just cleaned, watch me as I cleaned up, a satisfied smirk on her face. One afternoon, I found my laptop screen cracked. It was the last straw. I stormed into the kitchen, where Mrs. Harwood was humming to herself. "What did you do to my laptop?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. She turned, feigning ignorance. "Oh, did something happen to your laptop? That's unfortunate." "You did this, didn't you? You're trying to make my life hell." She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. "You brought this on yourself, Emily. You're not wanted here. The sooner you realize that, the better." Just when I thought things couldn't get worse with Mrs. Harwood, she struck where it hurt the most. My father's pictures, the last memories I had of him, were gone. I had put them up in the living room, a small comfort in these trying times. But now, the walls were bare, as if he had never been a part of my life. I found Mrs. Harwood in the kitchen, smirking over a cup of coffee. "Where are my father's pictures?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, feigning confusion. "Pictures? Oh, those old things. We needed more space. This isn't a shrine, Emily." I felt a surge of anger, my hands trembling. "Those were my father's pictures. You had no right to take them down." She shrugged, her voice cold and dismissive. "They were depressing, always staring at us. It's time to move on, Emily. He's gone, and clinging to the past won't change that." I couldn't believe her cruelty. "You can't just erase him from my life. Those pictures were all I had left of him." She stood up, towering over me. "Your father has nothing to do with this house. It's time you accepted that and moved on. Just like your marriage, it's in the past now." I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something to show how much she had hurt me. But I knew that's what she wanted. So, I held back, biting my tongue. "You're heartless," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "I'm practical, Emily. It's a trait you clearly lack. You should learn to let go." I left the kitchen, my heart heavy with loss and anger. Mrs. Harwood had taken the last piece of my father from me, and it felt like losing him all over again. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the empty spaces on the walls echoing in my mind. Mrs. Harwood's words kept replaying in my head. Let go. Move on. But how could I? Those pictures were more than just images. They were a connection to my father, a reminder of his love and presence in my life. I knew then that this was more than just a battle over living space. It was a fight for my memories, my past, and my identity. Mrs. Harwood had declared war on the most personal parts of my life, and I couldn't let her win. I had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim my father's memory and my right to mourn him. It was a battle I couldn't afford to lose. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a call from a notary changed everything. I was sitting in my room, trying to muster the strength to face another day with Mrs. Harwood, when my phone rang. "Mrs. Emily Harwood? This is John Carter, the notary handling your father's will. We need you to come in to discuss some important matters," the voice on the other end said. I was taken aback. "My father's will? I wasn't aware he had left anything." "Yes, he did. It's quite urgent. Can you come in today?" Mr. Carter's tone was serious. I agreed, curiosity and a glimmer of hope stirring within me. Maybe this was the break I needed. At the notary's office, Mr. Carter handed me a folder. "Your father left you a significant amount of money, Miss Emily, enough to start a new life." I was speechless. My father, always the quiet supporter, had given me a lifeline. "And there's something else," Mr. Carter continued, handing me another set of documents. "Your father left these for you. He said they were important." I opened the documents, but Mr. Carter stopped me. "Perhaps you should look at these in private. They're quite personal." I nodded, clutching the folder tightly as I left the office. Back home, I locked myself in my room and began to read. The documents were records of financial transactions between my father and Mark. My father had lent Mark a significant amount of money, over $200,000. I couldn't believe it. All this time, Mark had been in debt to my father. Was this why he was so eager to divorce me after my father's death? Did he think the debt died with him? I felt a surge of strength. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had the upper hand. My father had given me more than just money. He had given me the power to fight back. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to make Mark pay for his deceit and Mrs. Harwood for her cruelty. The tables had turned, and it was my turn to set the rules. Armed with the truth about Mark's debt to my father, I felt a newfound sense of power. The day of the divorce signing, I was ready to turn the tables. As we sat in the lawyer's office, Mark and his mother smirking confidently, I waited for the right moment. Just as Mark was about to sign, I spoke up. "Before we finalize this, there's something you should know, Mark," I said, sliding the loan documents across the table. He glanced at them, his smirk fading fast. "What's this?" I leaned back, feeling in control for the first time in months. "That's the debt you owe my father, over $200,000, and now it's owed to me." Mrs. Harwood's eyes widened in shock. "What debt? Mark, what is she talking about?" Mark's face was a mask of panic. "It's nothing, Mom. Just some old business between Emily's dad and me." I laughed. "So, you thought you'd get away with not repaying him? That's why you were so eager to get rid of me?" Mark didn't meet my eyes. "It's complicated, Emily. I was in trouble, and your dad offered to help." I shook my head, disgusted. "You were going to leave me with nothing while sitting on a debt you owed my father. You're despicable." He tried to touch me, but I backed away. "You've been hiding this. You owe me that money, and I intend to collect." The lawyer, a middle-aged man who had been silent till now, interjected. "If these documents are legitimate, Mr. Mark, you're legally obligated to repay this debt." Mrs. Harwood turned to her son, her voice rising. "You borrowed money from her father, and now we have to pay her?" Mark tried to speak, but I was faster. Yes, he did, and he thought he could escape it by divorcing me quickly after my father's death. The room was tense, the air thick with the revelation. Mrs. Harwood looked from the documents to Mark, her expression one of betrayal and anger. "You've been lying to us all along," she hissed at Mark. "You put us in this mess." Mark's usual confident demeanor had crumbled. He looked defeated, cornered. I had no choice. I was in trouble, and Emily's dad offered to help." I stood up, feeling a rush of satisfaction. "Well, now you can repay that help. Every single dollar. You thought you could outsmart me, but you were wrong." Mrs. Harwood was fuming. "We'll fight this. We won't let you take everything from us." But I knew I had the upper hand. "You can try, but the law is on my side. I suggest you start figuring out how you're going to repay the debt." As I walked out of the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of triumph. For so long, I had been under Mark and his mother's control, their whims and cruelty dictating my life. But now, the tables had turned. I had them right where I wanted, and I wasn't going to let them off easy. This was my chance to get back what I was owed, and I was going to take it. The day Mark and Mrs. Harwood sold the house to repay the debt was the day I finally felt free. As they packed their last boxes, I couldn't help but savor the moment. "You brought this on yourself, Mark," I said, watching him struggle with a heavy box. "You could have been honest with me." He avoided my gaze, his shoulders slumped. "I know. I'm sorry, Emily." Mrs. Harwood, looking older and more defeated than ever, chimed in. "This is all your fault. You've ruined everything." I shook my head, no longer affected by her words. "No, Mrs. Harwood, you two did this to yourselves. I'm just claiming what's rightfully mine." They left without another word, and I watched as their car disappeared down the road. It was the end of an era, one filled with pain and betrayal, but also growth and resilience. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past months lift off my shoulders. It was time to start anew. With the money from my father and the repaid debt, I bought a small, cozy house, just for me and Whiskers, who I had brought back home. Sitting in my new living room, Whiskers purring on my lap, I called Sarah, my friend who had helped me through the darkest times. "Hey Sarah, it's done. I'm finally free," I said, a smile spreading across my face. Sarah's voice was warm and excited. "That's amazing, Emily. I'm so proud of you. You've come so far." I looked around my new home, a sense of peace settling over me. "I have, and it's all thanks to people like you who stood by me." "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Emily. What's next for you?" Sarah asked. I thought for a moment. A fresh start, building a life that's truly mine, and maybe helping others who've been through what I have. As I hung up, I realized that this was more than just a new house. It was a new chapter, one where I was in control, free from the shadows of the past. I had not only survived, I had come out stronger. I stood up, whiskers following me as I walked to the window, looking out at my small garden. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild and to find joy in the simple things. I had lost much, but I had gained even more, a sense of self, strength, and the courage to move forward. This was my story, my journey, and it was just beginning.